Are the Mountaineers on upset alert? Well, if you listen to people around the country, they are. If you look at the odds, they are. If you look at the win projection, the probability to get this victory for the Mountaineers, they are. We now, on this episode of Mountaineer Report, available everywhere you get your podcasts, and of course, throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network, are going to discuss if we think West Virginia is an upset alert heading into their Week 2 matchup on the road at Ohio. A good Ohio program now, not just a team, but a good Ohio program going off of recent memory. Granted, an 0-1 Ohio team after a close loss to another Power 4 in Rutgers. And West Virginia 1-0, but a victory over an FCS. So questions still all over the place about how this West Virginia team will look all year. Mike Asti, and joining me as always is Luke Blain. Again, Mountaineer Report, available everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. Also here on YouTube and West Virginia Sports Now. So, Luke, before we get into the Ohio matchup, and the odds right now, Mountaineers favored by about 3.5. It dipped to 3 and below the last couple days after opening up around 3.5 for DraftKings, FanDuel, most major books. It's back to 3.5 from what I just saw before we hit record here. That's interesting. Money coming back, swinging back to West Virginia, but that's kind of natural. But still not nearly what it probably would be if this was in Morgantown with a group of 5 versus a Power 4. But before we get there, I do want to get your thoughts. You joined me in the press box. West Virginia ended up with a big victory over Robert Morris, 45-3. Robert Morris barely could move the ball. The Mountaineers' defensive effort, statistically speaking, was one of the best in years. And Nico Markio was efficient. They put up numbers. They had a big play in the second half. They scored some points. It was a rough first half. A lot of mistakes, a lot of turnovers. Took them a while to get the offense going. Rich Rod was happy for the win, but was far from satisfied with the effort. What did you make of West Virginia's Week 1 win, going beyond just what that final score showed? Because if you noticed, a lot of people writing about the game that were not there, that do not cover the program, that were not, even tapped in at all, that maybe just see the score, look at the stats, and wrote about it nationally. They seem to get a different picture than those of us who were there. But how did you take in West Virginia's, I guess, big win in Week 1?
Yeah, well, just thinking about it, I think it's the beauty of having an FCS team in the first game. You have that room for mistakes. You have those, because WVU's had those in the past, and they've started out 0-1 for the past 5 years until
Yeah.
now. I mean, shoot, if you go out there next week and fumble 4 times in the first half against Ohio, I promise you're not going to be winning at halftime. And, they cleaned it up. The second half was much better from the offensive standpoint. The defense was really flying around the field on Sunday, which felt new. Like that was there was a certain defensive mindset or effort standpoint that really hadn't been there from what I'd seen. And I was impressed with that. I think, you just got to clean it up. You got to be able to, you know, you got to be able to hold on to the ball really. And then also you get a nice glimpse of what the future could look like with that Scotty Fox touchdown run. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, there was some opportunities later in the game for the second and third stringers to get some reps, but like Rich Rod said, if you go up quicker and by a lot more, then you have more room to test that out. And I think that in a roster that probably has way more moving parts than you'd want at this point because of how many new players there are. I think you want to be able to get as many guys into a game, especially an FCS game, as possible.
Yeah.
So this week can't be as much seeing what works, but you have to really put whoever's out there that you think can go out there and win. Because if you think that WVU is going to walk into that stadium and just ease into a win, I can't get behind that. I think that there's a very, very realistic chance, I say realistic as like a non-zero chance that WVU could be upset this week. And you thinking about it,
Yeah.
people called it a trap game because they have the brawl next week. Expectations are really high for that one, but you can't overlook this one. And to be fair, Pitt is I think in a trap game this week too. People are saying I can't remember who they play this week,
Well,
but
they're at home.
another.
It's Central Michigan, I believe.
Oh yeah,
But they're at home is the difference. But yeah,
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
But you think about that from those standpoints. I mean, WVU just flat out has to be ready, and I can't imagine Rich Rod would be the kind of guy to look forward to much. But you have to think that the brawls. You have to think
yeah.
that the brawl's been in the back of his mind, and it will be the entire time leading up to it.
Yeah, it's only natural. That's why people
Yeah.
maybe referred to this as a trap game. And Rich Rod didn't like any talk of trap game, didn't like the question. But it's fair to mention because you do have really what could dictate whether you're one to success or not, and that is not fair. But if West Virginia loses the brawl, loses it convincingly, especially at home, there's not a receipt to get back the next year. We saw the schedule. We know what Ren Baker said. There's no room. It's not happening until 2029. They're going to take a break. Rich Rod's in his 60s. Narduzzi's been there forever. There is no guarantee they ever coach against each other again. It's actually unlikely. And there's no guarantee Rich Rod ever sees Pitt again. And certainly if he doesn't start winning, he's unlikely to still be there at that point. This isn't just he gets to do whatever and dictate all terms here. So Ren Baker may not still be around. The sport is incredibly different than it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So it's impossible to project this is going to be the same and everyone's going to get a receipt when the next series opens up. So that the magnitude of that, obviously being on September 13th, it is just through the roof. But Rich Rod wants to put a pin in it until next week, so we will try to put a pin in it until next week. But that's why this naturally becomes the trap game. And Pitt has the comfort of being at home. That's why their spread is still 20 plus, even though it's a solid lower level program as well. And Pitt has been prone to lose those games in the past, whether it be home or away. So who knows if they're the program that messes it up. They had a more convincing victory, I will say, against a Robert Morris rival, another low level school in Pittsburgh and Duquesne. I mean, they had that one from opening kickoff all the way through and could have even embarrassed them further. They had one of their best offensive showings ever. They won that game more convincingly because they didn't have the first half of the fumbles, the first half of struggling. Granted, West Virginia's dealing with a new roster, etc. I think the issue for the Robert Morris game for me, and it's what Rich Rod brought up that you just brought up. Going into the game, even Neil Brown was undefeated against FCS schools. You figure you're going to win. You figure you're going to win comfortably. You figure you're going to eventually pull away and get a W. That's what happened under Neil Brown. They had close first halves. They pulled away, won by 30. That's what happened in week one with Rich Rod. But when you have a new roster, a roster full of position battles that he admitted going into the game they wanted to carry over into the Robert Morris game to evaluate even further, and you have all these quarterbacks, and yeah, you started Nico Markiel. He deserved to start, but you want to figure out what else you have, and Jalen Henderson's also a guy that you believe in. He's a Power 4 transfer. It would have been better and more of a victory if you could have had the smooth sailing first half and then played more of those quote-unquote backups in that second half. Did not even have to have Markiel start that second half. Could see more from Jalen Henderson. Could see more from Scotty Fox. Max Brown was hurt, which we later found out after the game, but it would have been better if he could have played. Khalil Wilkins to get some time in that game, to go further down the line, and the rest of the team, the defense especially, get to see more of the O-line, the D-line, get everybody in, because that's the FCS game. And they were able to do it a little in the fourth quarter, but not really to the level that you can get a true evaluation. I mean, they were going to win, but they weren't getting enough of a win to make people happy until the fourth quarter. Certainly not until the second half. And you can't fumble and have those mistakes against anybody. And we talked about it in the press box. I don't think most of those fumbles were caused by Robert Morris. They were more mistakes by West Virginia players. The Cam Vaughn fumble, everyone talks about the yards he put up, the touchdown. He's a big play waiting to happen, but his fumble should not have happened. And you can't have big plays cancel out each other. That's the issue, too. That's an FCS school that laid a hat on you for a clean tackle that was legal, and you coughed it up after a big play with open space in front of you. That happened multiple times. And there was another fumble that could have also went against them. They could have lost more than they lost. And another team, Ohio, would certainly take advantage, and I guarantee that many fumbles Ohio is going to convert. They're going to do something with them. They're going to score points. Parker Navarro is going to move the field if you give him a short field and then score. And you get down big to Ohio, or you have a small lead against Ohio, they're going to really feel life at their place. So it'll be a totally different animal for the Mountaineers in week 2. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, made possible by West Virginia Sports Now and available everywhere you get your podcasts, as we are recapping Robert Morris, which has now been really done to death, and now moving into talking about the Ohio Bobcats. And if West Virginia is on upset alert, and I guess to lean fully into kind of previewing that matchup, Luke, I think we would agree. I guess they were at least on upset alert. I know some people are pushing back even at the phrase, but do you think that's a fair phrase and a fair headline and a fair talking point leading into the game? Because there are some that don't even like that being brought up.
Yeah, I think that whenever you look at a G5 or well, a G6 school now playing against a Power 4, Power 5 program, if that a group of 5, group of 6 school wins,
Yeah.
it's an upset.
Sure.
Just period.
Yeah.
Like Boise State was like upset some teams last year,
Yeah.
and so they were nearly upset Oregon.
Yeah, you look at
But
resources, money,
yes,
the locker room
yeah,
they're going to stay in, they're going to figure that out really quick,
yeah,
NIL, etc. The Power Four has an easier opportunity at success than a group
right,
of 5, even though they're playing a harder schedule because they're in a power conference. The head-to-head matchups, it's not 100% across the board. Lower level schools, the group of 5s do get victories, but
mhm,
the Power Four should get a win. It's an upset no matter the program, 100%. Even West
yeah,
Virginia being quote unquote down and trying to rebuild into a new era, it would be an upset. But it's in Athens, it's not in
yeah.
Morgantown.
Exactly, and Ohio almost beat Rutgers at Rutgers Stadium, so
Yeah,
imagine what they might be able to do with their home crowd in front of them. Now, to my understanding, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's gonna be a good bit of Mountaineer fans there,
yeah,
and,
true.
so that'll be good for WVU, but at the end of the day, this is an Ohio Bobcat team that you have to come out quick with because that's what Rutgers did. Rutgers got that big halftime lead, and then they only scored 3 points in the second half. And that's, that's on their home field. That is just pure skill and scheme by Ohio. And WVU, you can't that's what I'm saying. You can't fumble 4 times in the first half.
Yeah,
You just can't do that.
right.
Because it kind of felt like more of the same. You were talking about how Neil Brown went undefeated against FCS teams. Well, he definitely had those ugly first halves
Yep.
where you're not clicking as much as you want to. And I think that was probably a reason that Mountaineer fans are wanting to move past that. I think there's probably still a little bit of a lingering feeling that it's like, okay, how much is different? And that's what WVU needs to prove with this game. They can't, if you want to prove that you're out of the Neil Brown mediocrity era, you have to go out and win this game.
Yeah.
And, I'm
Mhm.
still, this team is a reigning MAC champion. I'm not saying you have to defeat them easily. You probably don't want it going down to the last drive of the game, but you have to go in there and you have to win and you have to instill that confidence heading into the brawl.
I think there's a real opportunity here, and especially the next couple weeks before conference play, but even in this Ohio game, to really send a message. And to send the message from Rich Rod on down, and he's the face of the program, that this is a different era now. And it doesn't mean instantaneously it's immediately back to where it was 17, 18 years ago, where they're national contender. It's going to take time to get there. But that would send a message going into Ohio. And certainly if you get a convincing victory, but if you get a win by 10 plus points, or at least you have it locked up where you're taking a knee or they know they can't have a comeback at the end of the game, you win it where you're shutting their fans up. There is not going to be a celebration afterwards. They're going home. We can drive home easily. There's nothing blocked off for a party because that's an underrated party school, by the way. And you have a win in a tough place to play. That win would carry more weight around the country than Pitt being Central Michigan at home because you're doing it in a tough place to play. It carries more weight than Rutgers skating by and getting a big win because they scored a lot of points and so did Ohio and their defense collapsed, but they got the win. But that was at Rutgers. If you go into Ohio, that would really, I think, send a message that this is a different mentality, if nothing else. Doesn't mean they're going to go ahead and win 10 games, go ahead and win the conference. Doesn't mean anyone's going to predict them to do that. But I think that'll put something in Pitt's mind that, oh, this is a different Mountaineer team, even though it's a different group and different roster, different coaching staff, that would put a different vibe on the team. And it would just, I think, allow the fan base to sit back and say, okay, this is different. If West Virginia goes to Ohio and wins 38-10 or 28-10 even. If you see that score when they're a 3.5-point favorite and everyone's saying they're on upset alert against the defending MAC champion that is hanging with Power 4 schools that feels like they're on that fringe of being contender as a group of 5, I think you would at least send the message that, okay, this is different now. I'm not going to win every game, but this is a different vibe. That's hard edge to go in there with a mental fortitude to that place. That could be their season championship for Ohio. They win that game. That might be a mural on their wall forever. And if you look at programs that have been there, they did beat Pitt 20 years ago. So you could argue that one. They beat Iowa State in recent memory. But West Virginia might be the most historic program that the Ohio Bobcats have ever faced. It's really West Virginia and Pitt, whatever argument you want to get, and it really goes to argument claims and what's legit or not. But it certainly in recent memory, West Virginia is more historic than Iowa State. If you're going to compare those, they play Ohio State, but it's a guaranteed loss every year. So aside from the Ohio State game, and I'm talking at Athens, you could certainly argue West Virginia. And that's what they're going to expect. As you mentioned, they're going to have a packed house there. They're going to sell out. It's going to be the largest crowd ever in attendance there. So at Ohio, it's probably the most historic program they'll ever see there and have a chance to beat even because Ohio State's a different category. To go in there and get a win, they're a good team. Parker Navarro is a really good quarterback. It would be a quality win. That would mean something. But to go in there and crawl through it, or have the series of fumbles in the first half, or 3 fumbles on 4 plays that Rich Rod said he never has seen his entire career, as insane as that was, or to certainly lose, that is where you kind of pop a balloon vibe-wise. And even if you win the brawl, you're always going to have fans say, yeah, but you ruined it by losing to the lower level school. Like, I know it's on the road, but you got to get those wins. And I think you'd also, Luke, I mean, it would legitimize what Ren Baker's been saying, that the schedule wasn't fairly constructed, that you don't want to have multiple Power 4s. You don't want to have 11 Power 4s on a year. He wants to play the G5 with the FCS and only 1 Power 4. If you go ahead and lose the year that you don't have 11 Power 4s, and people are going to say, well, if we're going to lose them all, we might as well just stack it. You got it. And I'm not saying that's a sound opinion, because it's still a more reasonable schedule now for years to come than what it has been. But you got to get the win. And the one thing I will add, I think if they win it, now people may freak out. Obviously, if you win it convincingly and comfortable, you send the message. If you win it by 1 point in a game-winning field goal, you're not sending a message. People might still be concerned. The fans may freak out. But in reality, I think the program should still take it. I mean, any win counts the same. That's a tough place to play against a good team that just hung with a Power 4. If West Virginia can just simply win the game, that's all they got to do. They got to get out of there with a win some way. Now, going to the matchup, though, I don't know if you watched any of the Rutgers game. Ironically, they played Jacksonville State in the bowl game a year ago. Rich Rod wasn't still coaching, but there was some connection there. Some coaches still around for that. They are the defending MAC champion. Granted, if they lose this one, they're going to be the best 0-3 program in the country, because I don't see them obviously beating Ohio State before their conference play. What about Ohio? What does Ohio do that maybe gives you pause that they actually could get this win, maybe digging deeper than just Parker Navarro being that dual threat quarterback? Because he screams that Rich Rod type dual threat quarterback, but the way he plays and the way he looked against Rutgers and really has looked his whole career there, that could be a recipe for disaster. It's going to be a very, very tough day for the D-line all the way up on the defense.
Yeah. Well, thinking about it, looking at the performance this past Saturday, Ohio was 5 of 5 in the red zone. And that's you look at their drive chart, most of those scoring drives are 10 plays, 13 plays. There was a 9 play in there. They thrive in not necessarily needing that big play. So the key into stopping them is you're going to have to control the game on third down. The Ohio went 5 of 10 on third down. And on the flip side, they forced Rutgers to go 1 of 10 on third down. Now they did go 5 of 5 on fourth, but third down. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe Rich Rod will go for it on fourth 5 times on Saturday if it comes to that. But I definitely wouldn't put that
Yeah.
out of the picture at all.
Yeah.
But you have to win the time of possession battle, and that's what Rutgers did, and that's how they won. They got
Yeah.
that field goal at the end of the game. So time of possession is going to be huge. This is going to be a fundamental football game, I think, more than anything. I don't think it's going to be one of those games where you're seeing the big plays or seeing the trick plays. It's going to be a line it up, some read option, RPO, football on both sides. And, like WVU utilized that in ways that we hadn't seen, obviously, in the past 6 years. Neil Brown and Rich Rod are different coaches. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting how much of that scheme was just get the ball into the hands of Cam Vaughn really quickly and let him do something after the catch.
Mhm.
And that's how WVU is going to need to win this one, because the O-line was not looking great last Saturday. And you can't, in a game like this where time of possession matters so much more, you cannot let a sack take you out of a drive. That will be a backbreaker. You got to limit procedural penalties, holding penalties. You got to take care of the ball, and you just got to keep getting more and more yards each play. And,
Yeah.
it's not going to be, I don't think, I'm not expecting an explosive type of football game where teams are lobbing it up. I think this is going to be just line it up and run it down your throat football on both sides, no matter who's getting the ball, whether it's quarterbacks, running backs.
Yeah. Yeah, and as much as it doesn't feel to me like it's going to be one of those 42-40 games, or although that was kind of the game that Ohio played against Rutgers, but you're going to have to be able to score. And West Virginia's offense showed some explosiveness in that second half against RMU, but it took a while to get going. I think the hope for Rich Rod and the Mountaineers is they got their lack of focus. They got their mental mistakes. They got their errors and turnovers. They got the slow start for the offense, shaking off the rust. They got those kinks out of their system in that first half against Robert Morris, because they always happen throughout a year, maybe early in a year. There's no preseason in college football. Maybe they wouldn't have happened if you had that preseason game. And you won't see that opening up the Ohio game. If you do, then it could spell disaster where not only do they lose, but they could get blown out. I mean, there's an opportunity that they lose by 20 points if they're going to have 4 or 5 fumbles in the game. But maybe they get that out of their system. Maybe the offense clicks more. And maybe defensively, the intensity that you saw against Robert Morris, because as I put up even in a story I released today, it's very hard to evaluate the defense from the RMU game. And you certainly can't look at them last year because it's a whole new group, a different coordinator. Zach Alley is way different than Jordan Leslie, of course. So you don't have much to go off of outside of practice in the spring, fall camp, and the FCS opponent. But the little thing that I think can add confidence to the defense, that they can stop Ohio, can stop Parker Navarro. It will not be a 34-31 game. And the defense can be why West Virginia wins the game, as long as the offense doesn't make mistakes and does enough, and Nico manages the game again like he did, is how freaking physical they were, how there wasn't that much loafing. Now, Rich Rod pointed out a few times, but he even said it wasn't that much. Like, defensively, they were mostly satisfied with the effort. They didn't have to do that much because RMU couldn't move the ball, so maybe that's easier, and Alley brought this up, Zach Alley. But it looked like a defense that could also be good against better opponents. We'll see against Ohio. We won't know until we see them against Ohio and certainly Pitt, and then onto the Big 12 schedule. But there were parts of that defense, the intensity, the physicality, all of that, the effort. The secondary looked better. The linebackers looked better. It looked like a unit that was coached better and is in a better position to have success on a regular basis. That's just what it looked like. And that's not even me throwing shade. That's just what it looked like. So that could carry over. And if that defense shows up in Athens, then I do think Parker Navarro has a harder time against the West Virginia defense if they play like they did in week 1 than he did against the Rutgers defense. That, I think, is a fair possibility here. And even the RPO offense and needing to work RPO and change it up on a dime and, do a lot scrambling. Parker Navarro does a lot scrambling. He is the RPO king. run pass option, and then he quickly picks one, and then he does it, and he can even make, if nothing's there and he picks the pass, he'll even scramble out and gain 20 yards. That's how hard he is to defend. But Nico Markio could kind of be that. He was that in week 1. I don't think he's as fast or athletic, but if he can be efficient and doesn't make mistakes and gives you 80+% completion percentage again, maybe he manages the game enough and does enough through the air and on the ground that he is the perfect quarterback to counter Parker Navarro in Ohio's offense, and with West Virginia's defense, lead them to a win. It certainly could happen. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, talking Ohio and the matchup to come for the Mountaineers here in week 2. This show available everywhere you get your podcasts and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network. Was there anything that Rich Rod, Zach Alley, or even any of the players said from the weekly press conferences this week that stood out to you aside from just evaluating the RMU win? Because they even admitted it's hard to evaluate off of that, and then going into this matchup.
Well, I mean, I think the emphasis, I'm not trying to think of this as a trap game. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Like, Rich Rod obviously doesn't like that kind of talk, because I think the second you kind of let that mentality in, the more likely it is to happen. And the more likely you're going to think, you don't want to go out there and think. Like, that's the thing. You don't want to go out there and be thinking about, what if this happens? What if this happens?
Blame me if they lose then. You let the talk in the building. It's my fault.
Yeah. You want to go out there and execute. And I think that's what Rich Rod's focused on. I think that's what the players and coordinators are focused on, is executing. Because if WVU executes to their potential, they will win this game. Like, that's not like
right.
What I see when I look at this matchup is the potential for WVU to have mistakes and shoot themselves in the foot, and then Ohio take over, and Ohio kind of determine the course of this game. You have to have control, and that's where time of possession comes in.
Yeah.
That's where being able to just keep the ball comes into play. And I think that, because this is, Ohio is the ultimate trap game. I mean, they're like one of the best G6 programs out there, reigning MAC champions with a lot of returning players from
At
that
home.
team.
Yeah.
They're established. They are a more established roster in terms of knowing who does what. I'm most likely the players knowing each other and having that chemistry. They are a more established roster in that aspect than WVU is, just because, the roster turnover and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's the key to it, is you just have to go out there and execute better and execute to your potential. And I think WVU will be fine if they do that.
Yeah, it's without a doubt, and this is why one's a Power 4 and one's not, there's more talent on the Mountaineers. I'm sure that's even being sold to the Ohio team, that, give or take a few players, argue with Parker Navarro or not, that overall roster depth, they don't have the talent of the Mountaineers. So let's go ahead and shock the world. Let's not make the mental mistakes ourselves, try to force them to make some mistakes. We're at home, we're feet off the crowd, and then we'll go ahead and get a big win for our program's history. I'm sure that's the speech from Brian Smith before his team takes the field at halftime. If it's close, maybe it's already been said at some point this week. So it could even very well be, Luke, that if West Virginia goes in there with the mental strength, and if they really are hard edge, and that goes down again from Rich Rod to Zach Alley, and I really, really do believe those coaches, everyone at that program has fully bought in that hard edge is the way of life and is the way to win. And they believe it, and the players even believe it. They bring it up all the time. Certainly Nico Markio brings it up all the time, which is good. You want them to buy in. You could argue early in the Brown tenure, was everybody really buying into what he was selling? No. So this is a full buy-in. And if they go in there fully bought in, they clean up the mistakes, and they have the more talented group, Jaheim White could run for 150 yards, a couple touchdowns, and by himself get this victory. Nico Markio could have his best day. As long as he's efficient, takes care of the ball, that could be enough. You could see a turnover in terms of the defense forcing it and then taking it to the house. You could see a pick six. You could see a punt return brought back. West Virginia could be the team that forces Ohio to make mistakes, because, Luke, what nobody's talking about is, yes, there's pressure on Rich Rod to get this win, not make it a trap game. You go into the brawl 1-1 with a loss at Ohio. The conversation is certainly if game day is there, or if they don't come because of this. That's the rumor. If they would lose, they wouldn't come. That's a lot to put on you. That's a lot of pressure on Rich Rod. You can't have this be a real bad loss. This would be one of the worst losses for the program in a while, and it would be under you. It wouldn't be under Brown. But there's also pressure. There's also pressure for Ohio. I mean, they arguably are the team that people are picking to win, even though the spread doesn't say that. They are at home. They have a more experienced quarterback in their system in terms of games played, even though Nico's been at WVU for a while. They lost their head coach, but the offensive coordinator just ascended. Everything else is very, very similar there. They are the defending conference champ. West Virginia did not win a conference last year, of course. If they go in there and lose by 20 plus points, there are going to be people saying, you're good for the MAC, but that's it. And maybe they're going to start saying Ohio's overrated. Ohio lost the Rutgers game. Rutgers is not an elite program. Rutgers never has been what West Virginia has been in the past. Little bit under Ray Rice years ago when you were freaking born.
Yeah.
But like not since then. They haven't, their recent years are no better than Neil Brown. Like there's nothing to brag about at Rutgers. They should win. They were at home. I mean, honestly, if you put that game at Ohio, they probably lose with the way that game unfolded. Maybe the energy changes. And then they're probably going to go ahead and get trounced to Ohio State, which is normal and normal business. They'll be 0-3. So, yeah, they could fix it in their conference schedule, and that's what matters. But they got some pressure, too. And if you can force some turnovers, force them to press, get up early on them, score on the opening drive, Jaheim White gash the defense a little bit, you win the battle of the trenches, that could say something too and allow West Virginia to pull away early and have this be a comfortable victory by doing it early. Dare I say this is, easy analysis here, but what happened in the first 5 minutes of this game probably will dictate this entire game for me.
Yeah, I could very much say I'm with you on that. I think that, in the terms of the way both of these teams play the game,
Yeah.
I think momentum matters so much, and it's going to be a lot easier for Ohio to pick up momentum in this atmosphere than it will be WVU.
Yeah.
And obviously, people debate momentum all the time, but it's real in sports. You can try to say it's not.
I believe
it
in
matters.
it.
But I believe in momentum.
Yeah.
But I think it will come down to, not just who gets the ball first, maybe who capitalizes on offense first. Rutgers scored first against Ohio this past week, and they obviously carried that into halftime. And if you had a better second half performance, they don't have to sweat it as much.
Yeah.
But that's what they did. They got that momentum early, they got that spark early, and they built themselves enough of a safety net going into halftime that they could afford to not put up the exact same performance in the second half.
Right.
Obviously, you're not trying to only score 3 points in a half, but that's the way it played out. And at the end of the day, 1-0 is better than 0-1, and that's all anybody really cares about.
Sure.
So thinking I with the way, and that's the thing too, is both of these offenses are so similar that it's both. You have to think that both of these defenses are going to be pretty ready for the other one. So I wouldn't be shocked if this is a final score, like a 21-17 final score, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but those low scoring games make the big plays that much more important. And I think I think you just got to go in there, not let Ohio build up momentum. You got to take the game over yourselves, score early, score often, and that's just got to be the mantra for WVU this week.
Yeah, because Ohio also showed, and you just detailed it, that even if they get down by a couple touchdowns, they don't give up. They think they can come back, and they can score very, very quick, even though they normally like the 9, 10-plus play drives. They can score quick. They do have ability to put the points on the board quickly. They showed it against Rutgers. And again, you'd have to imagine here that as much as Nico Markio played well against Robert Morris, and he definitely is the starting quarterback here, and he's likely playing all the way through this game, I would imagine. And even though they're going to play Jalen Henderson, Scotty Fox, he's going to get the most looks, as he should. He looked better in the offseason than anybody else. You probably, if you're doing check boxes here and who has the edge in each category, you give coaching edge to Rich Rod, a borderline Hall of Fame guy and a guy who's ascending. But quarterback-wise, I got to give a check mark to Parker Navarro. I mean, he has been in the offense. He just did it against a Power 4 school. He knew the coaching staff already, even though it's a new head coach now. He feels very, very confident. And whether they win or lose, if you look at the numbers, he performs in every game. There is no example of Parker Navarro showing up and having a 4-interception, 100-yard game and a 50% completion percentage. That doesn't happen. He normally performs. So I'd imagine that West Virginia is going in thinking they're going to score. We got to match them. Our defense has to play well. We can't let them score 30, but they're going to, they wouldn't be shocked, I think, if they put up 30, and they got to be able to score 34. The Rutgers put up. They got to be able to do it early. They got to be able to put big plays on the board. They can't turn it over. It'll be interesting how they really coach that first half, Luke, and do they try a big play? They waited a long time to try a big pass play against RMU. They waited a long time to go to Cam Vaughn for that, and that's what he does. Do they try it earlier? Because when you're on the road, I wouldn't be shocked if you even see third play of the game, kind of like what the Mayo Bowl was, even though that wasn't road, but they thought maybe they had a road environment, despite a lot of West Virginia fans there early in the game. Try a big play. We've seen that in big games or road environments, football teams all the time. Wouldn't be shocked if they try to go to Cam Vaughn, catch somebody sleeping, third play of the game. And if they get that score, they can complete that big play. That's how you take a crowd out of it. That's how you demoralize them early. Waiting all day, and the game didn't unfold for you earlier against RMU, but waiting all day could also cause some problems. So how they coach early in this game may matter too. And there are going to be a lot of West Virginia fans there, of course. It is not far from Morgantown. It is not far from even Parkersburg, West Virginia, where you're from. That's actually very, very close. West Virginia is obviously the historic, bigger program. There are a lot of Mountaineer fans all over the country. Certainly in Ohio, there's a major WVU alumni chapter in Ohio that's planning a lot for this game. They may even have, I don't want to, throw that 75% thing again, but they maybe they'll have 75% of the stadium. They're going to have a lot of West Virginia fans there, but I'm sure the atmosphere, student section wise, is going to take over and feel like a big advantage for Ohio. Now, what was interesting that Rich Rod also talked about, especially from Rich Rod, but even Zach Alley made some comments here. Many of us are trying to go in the direction of, okay, Parker Navarro is that Rich Rod dual threat QB who always puts up numbers through the air and on the ground. Does that give you an advantage if you're West Virginia because you do that? That's your offense. That's Rich Rod for 30 years. You can scheme against it. You know what's coming. Zach Alley's learned under him. He can ask Nika Markio, what would you do here? And they kind of downplayed it. I don't know if it's just gamesmanship and kind of coaching before the game, but they downplayed it. Rich Rod kind of acted like it's not an advantage. Zach Alley joked and said he's going to have Scotty Fox run the scout team and maybe tell him to scramble all the time more than if he ever would try a pass. But what do you make of that? Do you think that could be an edge for West Virginia? Or are they the rare team equipped to know what to do against Navarro in Ohio, maybe more so than Rutgers was? Or is that overblown like the coaching staff kind of tried to argue?
You have to, to me, that just kind of feels like not wanting to tip your hand a little bit in terms of, that's what that sounds like to me. I do think, like, in the way that these two teams play the game and in the way that these two quarterbacks play, you have to think that you have a little bit of a glimpse into that style of offense and you're able to get more equipped for that. And, you don't have to be like whoever's playing against Mississippi State this week and ringing the cowbells on the sideline. You can you can show up and kind of know from practice a little bit of what you're going to see. And that's kind of like what we talked about in the season prediction is that's going to happen a lot for WVU this year. There's plenty of mobile quarterbacks that the Mountaineers are set to face off against. And I think, in just the terms of Ohio, they didn't take any sacks, gets the ball out quick. That's really what it looked like last week for WVU. So I don't know. It kind of looks like, I think we kind of have to take that for what it is, in that these two teams look a little bit similar in the way they move the ball on offense.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think like, but of course, maybe they don't want to give them that bulletin board material and be like, yeah, we're going to be prepared because they're just like us, like that. There's always that. Yeah. I can't imagine that. I think that Rich Rod is as funny as he is and as open as he is sometimes. I think he knows how to hold his cards to where people can't see him.
Yeah, no, 100%. He's been around the block a time or two. He definitely does. But it's an interesting thought because they kind of are mirror images of each other in a way, even at different levels. And this could certainly expose how West Virginia will fare against Jalen Daniels, against even Eli Holstein the next week. He's not Parker Navarro, but he certainly can move around. That was a problem last year. Certainly those last few minutes, he moved around all day, and then the secondary was horrible, and they were able to come back. That will show what West Virginia's defense can do. if Navarro has 250 yards on the ground and Ohio wins and they win going away, that's how you get the national 3-win projections, because that could be ugly as hell the next week after that. They're going to face mobile quarterbacks coming up, not later in the year. It's right away. So you could argue if they don't have a recipe against him, even though he's at home and there was a little advantage there, but if they don't have a recipe against Ohio and what they do, there might not be that much time to fix it and find it out to make it a respectable year moving forward and save things because of who they're going to face. And I will say, in Nico Markiel's credit, we'll get a little bit here on our evaluation of how he played before giving our game picks and anything else you want to add for this matchup here. I think he looked more poised against Robert Morris than last year. I think he looked comfortable there. I think the nail on the head that you just brought up, there was a quicker release from Nico Markiel if he was going to throw. He didn't hold the ball all day. In some of his bad games, he would hold on to the football. Maybe nobody was open, but that play would break down and he would be done. And he's not the fastest player in the world. He's not a Pat White burner, but he is a willing runner and can chunk yards and get yards. And maybe that Tyler Huff style from Jack State, 1,300 plus yards for them last year, and he's not in any way a burner. That's what Rhett Rodriguez, Rich Rod, they all brought up, that he can be Tyler Huff. So we saw that again. It's an FCS school. We saw that there, and he's only had a couple games like that. I know he's undefeated, he's won all these games, but the Arizona game on the road and then RMU, they're the only games that he really was picking up anybody apart and was being really efficient and looking great. The Cincinnati game, certainly the Pitt game a couple years ago, even the Texas Tech game. Like even if he would get wins, he didn't look all that great or comfortable. The defense would save him. Certainly the brawl a couple years ago, he barely could move the ball. This looked like a much improved Markiel. This looked like a comfortable quarterback, a confident quarterback, and the quick release is the important part of it, that you got to get rid of that football. That might be another advantage West Virginia that makes them similar to the Ohio offense that maybe Ohio's defense hasn't seen. And I do also think, going to the RMU game again, West Virginia's offensive line, as well as the D-line, but especially the offensive line, performed to a level that gives you confidence for the rest of the year as well. That's a new group. They either were just working their way up or they hadn't played together. It's not like the same O-line that Nico had for several years in a row. They were a veteran group, give or take a player or two. It's a different offensive line, a different coach, and they looked fine. If they don't have mistakes and they look fine, that could unleash Jaheim White, Nico Markiel, and even more big plays. And we didn't see a big play from Jaheim in week one. We maybe could see some now because the offensive line, to me, looked okay. And if they can keep that up, that could unlock him for more. But what did you see from Markiel from week one that you can take and pivot into the Ohio matchup? I mean, we're now getting into, you could argue maybe his mop start and going on the road to where he was from in Arizona, but now these are the biggest games of his life because now he's the guy and the wins and losses are going to go against him. And everyone always loves the backup QB who plays 2-3 games a year. You play all the games and your season doesn't go well, the fans may turn on you as well.
Yeah, I think, it definitely did. Whenever he first took over for Neil Brown, I mean, you did see those quicker release plays. You didn't want him sitting back there. You didn't want him having to read the defense too much because he was not prepping to be the starter for that week. Thinking about games like the backyard brawl and even, a little bit for Texas Tech, he did throw the ball a lot that year back in 2023. So now thinking about it, this is a guy who has more experience than he did 2 years ago. He can, obviously Rich Rod trusts him. He is a very capable runner. I mean, shoot, he scored the team's first touchdown of the season on a scramble. That might have been a design run, but I think that I think this is the most confident we've seen him because he has that full off season in this system to go out there. You have to imagine that it was his job to lose.
Right.
I think that this is by far the most and you could tell. I mean, you don't show up not confident and then finish 17 for 20 passing.
Sure.
He moves the ball. It always seems very intentional where he's putting it. I was impressed with Nico Markiel for the first week. And even when he did unleash it downfield, that ball to Cam Vaughn was a dime. It was a very, very good ball.
Yeah.
So Nico Markiel really feels like less of a question mark than years past. Even in years past, it was like, oh, what can he do? What's he going to show us?
Yeah, yeah,
Now, after this past week, it feels like he's in control of this offense. And that's not, you obviously don't get that out of a backup. It's unreasonable to think of him as that,
yeah.
being that way as a backup the past few years. But now I think it's different.
Yeah, and again, to be fair to Markiel, they even admitted, the old staff, that they pared down. Maybe they shouldn't have. This could be a criticism, but they pared down the playbook for him when he first got in there, so he wasn't getting the full repertoire. Or maybe you didn't like those past plays. But the point of it is, they didn't have the confidence in him to give him the full on keys. It was more of just don't screw it up game by game. This feels like that Rich Rod's certainly empowering him, although he's also talked about that as the season goes, unlike a lot of other coaches, he likes to actually have his playbook shrink for quarterbacks. That's something different too than a lot of coaches these days. They don't add plays because, okay, you're getting more comfortable, here's more to do. He figures out what Markule and others really are good at and just hammers them home. That's why I joked to you in the press box that get ready, because I remember it probably better than you do, that you could see some of the same plays over and over again. This could be the Novocaine offense. If someone gets really comfortable with some plays and they start working, Rich Rod will be prone to 2, 3, 4 plays in a row. I believe there was a game with Jack State that he literally did run into double digits in a row, and it was maybe 3 plays the whole game. And there was the one game where they basically just ran pretty much the whole game and abandoned the pass. He can do that. People always laugh when he makes comments like, I'll just not throw today if this player is going to give me lip. He might. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not out. It's not out of the question. So that to say that Markiel does appear more confident, more comfortable with this offense, and we may see more of what he's comfortable with moving forward. It may not mean more plays, but it may mean, again, quicker release, more comfortable, more confidence, and better for the offense. I think it's easily safe to say, and Ohio knows this too, Luke, we've not seen the best of this offense by a long shot in terms of their potential. And that's what they even talked about after the game. Markiel talked about this. Cam Vaughn talked about this. We have not seen the potential of this group at all from just one game against an FCS. They didn't have to do more, even though they won it easily. We may have not even seen the full-on potential of the defense because they only forced 2 turnovers. And if you remember, Zach Alley said for him to get a win, you got to force 3 a game. So they didn't even do that. They didn't have to because it's RMU. But the point of it is they certainly can't open up games fumbling the ball every other play. That just cannot happen. Ohio will take advantage and certainly beat you. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, previewing West Virginia's matchup with Ohio, and they're on upset alert. Doesn't mean they're going to lose, but I think it's fair to say they're on upset alert. That's not insulting talk. And look at the spreads. It's a good Ohio team, and you're on the road. And say what you want about scheduling, and if they should be there, they'll eventually get them at home. But this year's situation, an easy week 1 and then week 2 that could be a trap game before the brawl. We'll see how they handle it. What do you predict? What do you think's going to go down? We're going to be there. We're going to be covering the game. It is going to be a wild atmosphere. There are going to be West Virginia fans there. We're going to see a lot more of what this Mountaineer team is made of, but also a lot of what this Ohio team is made of, because they're pretty much staring 0-3 in the face if they lose this game, and this is the chance to set history for them. West Virginia has the brawl next. A lot on the line in week 2 for both teams.
Yeah, I do. I'll stick with my preseason prediction and say that WVU will win this game, but I think there's a very realistic chance that Ohio beats the spread. Looking at it, it's like is it +3 at the moment, or is
I
it?
saw 3.5 on DraftKings
Yeah,
and FanDuel before we recorded, but it could fluctuate 3, 3.5, whatever.
yeah, I could definitely see them beating the spread there. I think, this is going to be a hard-nosed football game. It's going to be, I don't think it's not going to be one of those flashy games. I think if you're a fan of defense, this might be the game for you, honestly.
Yeah.
So I I like the idea of a 21-18 final. I think that's right
I
in the
should have
range
went
in which
first
I'm
because
landing.
that's where I was going to go, right around that
Was it
neighborhood.
really?
I was actually going to go like West Virginia. I honestly think they seriously might win by a field goal in the final drive. It might come down
Yeah.
to that. I think WVU is going to win, but I think it's going to be a nail biter. I think Ohio is going to come to play, and I was literally, I'll say now, I was going to go 21-20 West Virginia. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where my head is.
Yeah, I could 24-21 could absolutely see that too.
Yeah.
This is This is going to be one of those games where you really see the prime Rich Rod offense, I think, in terms of, long drives, keep the ball,
Yeah.
things like that, control the clock. And that's what it's going to come down to because, that's what WVU needs to do to win this game specifically.
Yeah, and they're only focused on this game, of course. I mean, fans, media, we can talk about trap games. I do fully believe that they are only coaching this game. I
Yeah.
do not think that a veteran coach like Rich Rod and that staff, he's going to allow anybody to get their mind elsewhere. It's hard to know what an 18 to 22-year-old kid is going to be thinking about, but I am pretty sure I wouldn't be surprised in any way, Luke, that because he knows the team he's facing, because he knows the environment, and because he does not want anyone to have a trap game occur, that if you see a bad mental error for a fumble early in the game, I wouldn't be shocked if that kid's either on the sideline the rest of the way or isn't utilized as much, or you're going to really see Rich Rod flipping out. Like he didn't have to bring that energy in the Robert Morris game, even though there were some rumors that he maybe got more upset than he let on. But I think we're all going to see it for public consumption if they're laying the football on the ground at Ohio, because he knows they could easily lose if they do that. He even literally said, we can't play like this again and beat anybody else on our schedule. And
Yeah.
that certainly starts in week 2. It does not start in week 3. People maybe have this misconception that a non-power 4 is a cakewalk. This will not be a cakewalk. And if they win big, then go ahead and I'll be wrong. And then this is how you show the world. And if they win big and then beat Pitt, no matter what that score shows, and then win a game against Kansas to open up Big 12 schedule, that's how you get in the AP top 25. That's how you get in the CFP top 25 whenever they release that thing. That's how you get ranked. So there's an opportunity in front of them to get there. I just think it's going to be a very, very tough matchup. I do think they'll win, but it will in no way be easy, and I would not be shocked if they need a turnover or two in their favor. I think this is easy analysis as well again, but I think it fits here. I think the team that wins time of possession and the turnover margin wins the game. I think both teams are going to put up similar numbers. I think both teams are going to kind of show up for this and realize the environment, but West Virginia did not win the turnover battle against RMU. They still won big because that's an FCS school. They got to win time possession even more against Ohio. And yeah, big plays are nice, but they probably be best served to just churn the clock and then pop a score. And then Ohio's sitting there saying, oh man, there's only a few minutes left in this quarter, and all of a sudden we're down. That I think would be the recipe here to keep Mark Navarro off the field as much as possible and force them into getting quick drives put together, because they also like to have a methodical offense and not do that. Do you have a hot take or two for this game, or anything else you want to add, I guess, here?
Nothing really. I mean, this is kind of this is a hard game to add hot takes to,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like with
Yeah.
the way that I see these two teams playing, you could say that Jaheim White finally unlocks it this week. And I think, that's the thing. I feel like that's kind of the thing we haven't talked about as much, is if Jaheim White really gets going and you break, they're going to
Yeah.
ground and pound, sure. But if Jaheim White breaks 2 or 3 big runs,
Yeah.
that flips the tables in WVU's favor easily. So I think
100%.
that he is very much an X factor in this game, probably that goes a little bit underlooked just because of how Nico played last week and how Cam Vaughn played last week.
Mm-hmm.
And him, maybe they incorporate Rodney Gallagher a little bit more this week. I was kind of surprised at how little he was on the field.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, if the ground game breaks 2 or 3 big plays, I think WVU could really, really walk away with this one.
They could. And as I said earlier, I think Jaheim White has the opportunity to have that really 150-yard big game, couple touchdowns, and then maybe carry this. And if West Virginia wins this going away and sends the message and wins this in a blowout, I would imagine that Jaheim White overpowers and he has a big day, and Marco takes care of the football and they don't turn it over, and Cam Vaughn gets another big play or two as a receiver through the air, and maybe they involve the others, and you see more of Gallagher and Jaden Bray and others, and maybe they break 1 or 2 off a trick play. Like if it could go that way, Jaheim White had 18 carries, 93 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.2 on an average against RMU. But I will say, even though those numbers are good, that's not that great for an FCS game. And they didn't feel like they were even as good as those numbers are, because he did kind of struggle early on to get going. I don't think that can happen against Ohio too, but this is a tougher test now, so we'll see what he does. But he has an opportunity to fully break it here. And my only hot take will be I am going to predict, I don't know if I have a player in mind, but I'm going to predict that West Virginia picks up a defensive touchdown. Maybe they'll just set it up and get a short field, but I'm going to predict they get a defensive touchdown, whether it be a pick six or a fumble recovery. They get something that then will shut up the opposing crowd at some point and maybe flip this from being close for most of it and then go in their direction. And hey, the opposite could occur. Maybe Ohio is the one with that, and that leads Ohio to a win. I wouldn't be shocked with any result of this game. I would not be surprised if West Virginia wins big. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio wins by 20. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio wins on a game-winning field goal, and I would not be surprised if West Virginia wins on a game-winning field goal. None of that would shock me, and I think the coaching staff fully is aware that if they just get a win, that's all that matters. Because Luke, Rutgers didn't perform all that well, certainly not in the second half, but nobody's talking about how bad they played. They got to win. They freaking won the game. Just get a win, and then you'll be fine. If you lose, people will talk about all season and how the Mountaineers disappointed and how Rich Rod is in over his head and that they're far away from getting back to where they want to be, and scheduling, and fans will start turning, and even people that are happy about Rich Rod being back will start saying, this isn't the same, and they'll start leaving. You could get some toxic vibes in there, and going into the brawl, you definitely don't want that. So I think we both have the Mountaineers in a close game. That is, we'll see. We'll see what happens here, and it could very well be that I think the next couple weeks, if West Virginia wins, certainly are going to kind of be these rock fights. So we may not fully see this offense get unlocked for several weeks until Big 12 play. They just kind of got to get through this out of conference stretch and get these wins, and however they come. So that'll do it for this preview edition here of Mountaineer Report, wrapping up the RMU game and then looking ahead. The Mountaineers are on upset alert at Ohio, but they certainly can still win. They are the favorite. They should still win. They have the more talented group, but it will not in any way be easy, and it certainly will not be a cakewalk by any means. Mountaineer Report available everywhere you get your podcasts, available on YouTube, and of course, our coverage will be at West Virginia Sports Now.